Rattler and tie good on Friday works. And then Sunday, I think moving forward, it's probably going to still be listed as TBA just for the element of surprise. But I do think Dylan Eskew earns that spot. And so I think what you have right now is a pretty good rotation, a pretty good lineup. And, yeah, you're going on the road to face Missouri. Playing on the road in the SEC is always tough. But if you find a way to take 2 out of 3, I mean, that's all you can ask for.
Last one for you here real quick. Do you prefer walk-offs or do you prefer run rules?
From a time crunch standpoint, I prefer run rules. Because think about it this way. Friday's game, I don't think I got home till closer to 1 a.m. And then yesterday I was back and eating dinner around 8. So I can't complain with a good run rule.
I was going to say the run rules are probably a little bit better on the hard as well.
Oh, yeah. Friday's game was, look, I've covered a lot of games with this team, Tyler. I don't think I've covered a more stressful game than that one from, just a writing standpoint and all that, restarting stories. It's not fun. Yesterday was a lot smoother, a lot cleaner, and I think everyone was having a good time.
Well, hopefully that'll be the same case this weekend as they head on the road to take on Missouri out in the Columbia, and we'll check back in with you later on in the week. Appreciate it as always, Jack.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too. We'll dive into some of the numbers, who really showed out this weekend for the Gamecocks, and hear from Coach Kingston as well. Coming up, it is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday morning here on The Game. Welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you here on this Monday morning. It is time to talk some hardwood or talk some guys that took the wood to the baseball. Better way to phrase it for this past weekend with Gamecock baseball, again, taking 2 out of 3 games against the Kentucky Wildcats and picking up a much needed series victory to get themselves back over 500 in conference play, 11-10, as they get closer and closer to the end of the regular season. And I couldn't settle on one person to hand this award out to this week. And in fact, I could really give it to the entire offense. 28 runs against a very good Kentucky pitching staff, but 3 guys that I kind of want to focus on here. You have Austin Brindling, you have Kennedy Jones, and you have Blake Jackson. Now, these 3 guys are all similar in the ways that they all came in as transfers into this program this past season, and all of them have assumed different roles as the season has went along. Obviously, Kennedy Jones has kind of been a mainstay in this, in this lineup for this team, and has had his ups and downs. A lot more success than downs to this point this season, but has been on a little bit of a cold streak as of late, but picked it up big time over the course of the weekend into the series, going 5 of 11 with 8 RBIs and 1 home run. We had cut number 13 here, Dave. Here is Coach Kingston talking a little about Kennedy Jones and his recent success at the plate.
Well, we brought him in here to be a middle-of-the-order hitter, and he's been that for a great majority of the year. And look, the game is going to humble you at times. He's had some great moments. He's had some tough moments, as we all have. So the good thing is he bounced back today just to kind of show that he has the ability and the maturity to play at this level. And so that's all you can ask out of your players. If you have a tough day, flush it and be ready to go the next day. He proved that today.
And he's obviously done a very good job in that. And again, hitting a little under 500 for the weekend, but driving in a lot of runs, which is something he's been doing a good job of this entire season. Austin Brindling is somebody that's just recently gotten into the starting lineup, but has positioned himself squarely at the top of the order and done a very good job of being productive there. Batting average, and again, he has not been hitting at a consistent, or he's not been featured in the lineup at a consistent clip this entire season. But in the amount of time that we have saw him here as of late, he's been batting .400, has an on-base percentage of 500 so far this season, and the league will obviously eventually catch up to him once they get a little more film on him. And here's a guy that, we've talked about, has been at North Florida, been at Florida, been at Daytona Beach, community college. So he's bounced around to a lot of places. So still, the league familiarizing themselves with Austin Brindling. And again, that production will taper off a little bit as time goes along. But while he's been able to strike while the iron's hot, he's certainly done a good job of that. And his numbers for this weekend, very impressive as well. A 6 of 14 with 2 RBIs on the weekend, and just consistently finding ways to get on base, which as a leadoff guy, that is your primary objective, just get on base and allow those guys behind you to knock you in. And he certainly did a good job of that. And last but not least, we get to Blake Jackson, who had one of the best moments of the entire weekend, maybe of the entire season. Cut number 1 here, Dave, on Friday night.
1-0, hit in the air to left field. Backing up on it is Schmidt. He's at the wall. He leaps. It's out of here. It's out of here. It's a home run. And the Gamecocks have won the game. South Carolina has won the game on a 2-run homer from Blake Jackson. I wasn't sure anyone but myself saw the third base umpire signal home run. Blake Jackson finally crosses home plate, and Carolina has walked off Kentucky in the 10th inning, 6-5.
That was on Friday night, helped spark the rest of the weekend going forward for the Gamecocks. Blake Jackson with the home run to end things on Friday night. And it's been a quiet month for the most part for Blake Jackson at the plate. Just absolutely exploded this weekend. Went 4 of 11 overall with 6 RBIs and 2 home runs. And those 2 home runs could not have come at a better time, because this was the game on Friday night where they went into that bottom of the ninth, tied at, down 4-1. It took 3 home runs, which started with Blake Jackson hitting that first one to get the game into extra innings to begin with, and then he's able to go up there and blast the 2-run homer to end up ending things there in the bottom of the 10th inning for the Gamecocks. And again, that's what helped lead to a very, very good weekend overall, with South Carolina taking 2 of 3 from another top 5 team in the Kentucky Wildcats here at here at Founders Park. But a great weekend overall for those transfers. And this has been, as we talked a little bit about with Jack Veltri in that last segment there, this has been a season of a lot of lineup changes. A lot of shifting around. And yes, injuries like Will Tippett's injury have been a reason for some of those things happening. But for the most part, it's South Carolina trying to find what that exact right combination is in a lot of ways. With this offensive lineup, we've seen Cole Messina get moved around. Obviously, Austin Brindley getting put in the top of the lineup. Cassis has moved around a little bit. So you've had a lot of different options, different variations, trying to find what clicked exactly. And this past weekend, it seemed to be the best combination out of all of them. And we'll see if that continues to be the case going forward. As Jack mentioned, when Will Tippett does come back from an injury, what do you kind of do there? Who do you shift in and out of your lineup, or how do you move things around? As far as the infield is concerned, because Will Tippett is a very, very good glove when it comes to playing that shortstop spot. And, that's certainly a bridge to cross when you get there. But living in the moment, living in the now, a great weekend overall for South Carolina baseball, picking up a much-needed series victory, for the Gamecocks, and instilling a little bit of confidence in not only this team, but this fan base going in these next couple weeks. Because, again, it's a daunting task. Going on the road to the other Columbia is certainly never easy. And, not to mention the fact that it is the longest road trip that South Carolina will have made this entire season. So there's the fatigue factor that plays into it. You're playing a midweek game on Wednesday, so it's a very quick turnaround between that and hopping on a plane to go out there to, Columbia, Missouri. So hopefully everything could bode well for South Carolina as the week goes along, and they can pick up another much-needed series victory over, Missouri this upcoming weekend, and wrap things up with Georgia and Tennessee, and hopefully come out on top of those of those as well, and set themselves up for a good run in the postseason. As I mentioned at the top of the show, South Carolina is continuing to climb in the the D1 baseball poll, up to number 15 as of this morning after taking down another top 25 team. And I'm looking to see here, I do not believe, no, it does not appear that they have updated the field of 64 projections at this time. South Carolina, these past couple weeks, was slotted into that number 15 spot as far as being a host, and at that point in time being matched up with number 2 regional, which I believe last week was with Florida. It was with Arkansas, I believe. And for South Carolina to win a series against another top 5 team, hopefully that'll boost them up even more, and they can continue to climb in those projections as we get closer and closer to the postseason. Obviously, objective number 1, make the postseason. Objective number 2 is host in the regional. Objective number 3 is make a super, and hopefully get themselves back to Omaha, something they've not done in a very, very long time. More thoughts from Coach Kingston coming up. We'll let you hear that as we wrap up hour number 1. But as always, appreciate all of you tuning in on the Game TV. Sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass. You can watch us all day long. Just go to youtube.com, search the Game TV, subscribe to us, hit the bell icon to stay notified anytime we are live, and you can tune in to us all day long. You can also check us out on the 107.5 The Game app. Just go to the Google Play Store or the iTunes Store. Give us a download and listen to us wherever you go. More of Coach Kingston's thoughts on the series as a whole and this team going forward as we wrap up hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central. It is not the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. That is coming up at 11 o'clock. Forgive me. I host so many shows on here. I often get the names mixed up. No, it is still the Extra Point for another hour. Tyler Head with you, flying solo until 11. Wes and Chris will jump here with me for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, as they always do, coming up at 11 o'clock. I want to remind you, still no Grand Slam. Had a couple of bases loaded situations over the course of the weekend against Kentucky. South Carolina was able to drive some runners home, which is phenomenal, and I'll get to that in just a minute, but still no Grand Slam this season as the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway rolls on. $1,075. Yes, 1,075. That is how much money is in the pot as of right now. Convenient timing for that. So that means we got to see one on Wednesday, right? East Tennessee State, I'm banking on it right now. I really hope so. That'd be really cool if we were able to say that, the pot ended up being 107.5 before it was finally given away. But regardless, whenever it happens, head online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. As I mentioned, South Carolina was able to drive some runners in this weekend in bases loaded situations. Runners left on base has been a glaring issue for this team throughout the entire season. Third straight week with 28 runners left on base, funny enough. That number does skew a little bit this past weekend when we had so many guys that were on the base path, and South Carolina was able to score a large number of runs. So, inevitably, you're going to lead some guys on base when that kind of thing happens. Here is cut number 11, Dave. Here's Coach Kingston talking about making improvements offensively when runners are on.
Yeah, we just waved that magic wand today. That's all it took. I think, again, it's not a coincidence that we made the commitment to maybe add a few more bats to the lineup. And with the thought that what will it do to our defense? You added a few more veteran bats with a lot of at-bats under their belts that just kind of help it keep going and take a little bit better at bats. And I just think at the end of the day, how you drive in runs is you have short, efficient swings. You make good swing decisions. You swing at the right pitches, and you try to stay relaxed in the moment, and you stay under control. And when we do that, we can score 10 runs. We can score 13 runs like we did the last 2 days. But the game's not easy. I think sometimes it's easy to, think these kids should just hit 400 all the time. The game's hard, and our league is the hardest league in America, and our guys have been battling all year, and I'm hoping that we are now kind of hitting our groove.
Looking at the numbers from this past weekend, with runners in scoring position, South Carolina was 11 of 32, which is an average of 343, and 4 of 9 with the bases loaded, which again is something over the course of the past couple weekends they have gone over in a lot of situations when it comes to leaving those bases loaded. And there's nothing more aggravating than coming out of the inning knowing that there are 3 ducks on the pond that you weren't able to drive in. And again, you still left 28 on base over the course of the entire weekend. But again, when you're scoring runs as much as South Carolina did, 23 between those last 2 games on Saturday and Sunday, you're going to inevitably leave runners on. So that does change that number, or skews that number just a little bit. But for the most part, South Carolina offense definitely seemed to be in a different gear over the course of the weekend. We've talked about it a lot this morning. Just seemed a lot more aggressive when it came to what they were doing at the plate, swinging at first pitches, using some of those bunts, sac flies, those kind of things that help move the runners around and obviously drive some guys in. And you're going to have to continue to be aggressive offensively. Again, you've got 2 highly potent teams coming up down the line in Georgia and Tennessee that, you might have to win some of those games, 11-10 or something like that, where it's going to take a lot of offense. But, good showing this past weekend from South Carolina. And hopefully that translates going forward. And more than anything else, I just hope it instills a lot of confidence in the fan base. That there definitely seemed to be a different charge of energy around Founders Park this past weekend, or at least through the latter games of the series. As we talked about this last week, Terry and I did that, and I give credit to Kip Bucknight on the SEC Network broadcast the other weekend against Arkansas, where he pointed out, and he was critical of the fan base and not being as energetic and as charged up as perhaps they should have been for that big matchup the other week, but certainly seemed to be kicked in gear this past weekend. And maybe, Blake Jackson's, walk-off home run on Friday night really kind of set the tone for the weekend and really got people interested and engaged in it. But the rest of the weekend, including that wild back and forth game on Saturday, seemed to have really good crowds there. Which, again, if you're a team like South Carolina that has such a passionate fan base and has such a good home field advantage historically, you want your crowd to be as rowdy and raucous as possible to hopefully help you, in the long run in some of these tough SEC games. But theoretically getting over the hump this past weekend, by beating a team in Kentucky, and hopefully that bodes well going forward for these next couple series as they wrap up the regular season and obviously translate over into postseason play with the SEC tournament and hopefully a nice deep run in the NCAA tournament as well. But, to this point, as you're over halfway through the conference slate, you're still sitting above 500. You're sitting good in the RPI, obviously ranked very well, and should still be projected to host a regional at the end of the regular season. So feeling good about South Carolina baseball right now. Again, East Tennessee State coming up on Wednesday, 6:15 pregame versus 6:30 first pitch in that matchup for the Gamecocks. And then we will see what happens this weekend as they head on the road taking on the Missouri Tigers. It's 1 hour in the books, another hour to go. Plenty more draft conversation to get to. Also, some transfer portal talk for both a football and a basketball standpoint. There's a lot of things happening for the Gamecocks in reference to the transfer portal. We'll dive into all that, as well as talk to our guy, Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, get his thoughts on everything that happened with the NFL draft and Gamecocks this past weekend. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday morning. Beautiful Monday here in Columbia on The Game. Hour number 2, welcome back in. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on The Game. Obviously, very busy weekend on the sports front in a lot of ways. Baseball, obviously the NFL draft. One thing that we haven't talked a whole lot about, at least from a football standpoint, is the transfer portal. The spring portal window opened 2 weeks ago, tomorrow, which means it closes tomorrow. So April 30th is the deadline for the spring portal window. Now, that's just the deadline to enter. It's not a deadline to announce your commitment. So as long as you have your name in the portal at that point in time, you still have the opportunity to go elsewhere, after the fact. But tomorrow is the deadline for putting your name in. And, look, this is something that every program around the country deals with, whether it be in the wintertime or the springtime. You're going to have players that are going to end up entering their name into the transfer portal and deciding to play elsewhere. Nobody's exempt from it. Even the best teams, the Michigans, the Alabamas, the Georgias, they all deal with it. So South Carolina, obviously no different in that regard. You just hope it's not high-level producers or players that you assume to be high-level producers that do end up, entering the transfer portal and continuing their college careers elsewhere. And there's no denying that South Carolina lost some key pieces back in the wintertime. Juice Wells, who was expected to be your number one guy, and by all indications told us he was coming back to South Carolina. That ended up not quite being the case. You lose him. So you got to go kind of back to the drawing board at wide receiver. You lose who was your number one running back a season ago. Now, yes, you definitely feel like you've upgraded in that position significantly, but nevertheless, that is a big loss to lose somebody like that in that spot, defensively as well. You lose Stone Blanton, who was one of your starters. Even on special teams, you lose Mitch Jeter, who is a very consistent kicker in his time here at South Carolina. And those are some glaring holes that South Carolina had to fill, in the winter portal cycle that I think we all feel like they've done a pretty good job of so far. So the question going into spring, and of course Coach Beamer and staff had their quote-unquote exit interviews with players starting last week following the spring game to kind of give everybody an assessment of where they're at and basically lay it out to guys like, hey, here's where we think you're going to be in the fall. Here's what contributions we think you're going to make to the team and allowing them the opportunity to decide what their future is going to be, whether that be with this program or with somebody else. And up to this point, again, deadline to enter is tomorrow. South Carolina not really lost anything of note at this point in time as far as the transfer portal goes. Two names that we did learn as the week went on last week that did decide to enter the transfer portal are Sidney Fugar and Keenan Nelson Jr. But I think both those guys would qualify in what, Wes Mitchell has coined to be healthy transfers with guys that you did not expect to be your starters this upcoming season, did not expect to be the high-level contributors, on your team that I don't want to say you are not sad to see them go because you want to retain your roster as much as you can. And obviously the coaching staff never wants anybody to want to leave the program, but you understand it from the standpoint of what these guys are both seeking out in opportunities elsewhere, and it doesn't really ding you all that much. Sidney Fugar coming in from Western Illinois, a season ago where, we had a lot of questions about the offensive line throughout the offseason. Didn't realize we were going to have as many questions once the season got here. But, he was somebody that was brought in and kind of seen as a development guy from the beginning. I don't think anybody was expecting him to come in here and set the world on fire and go out there and be an all-SEC offensive lineman right away, and because of injuries, because of things getting shuffled around on the offensive line, he was thrust into a starting role quickly. And again, that was not the objective and the hope and goal when Sidney Fugar was added to this roster a season ago, and he was somebody that came in with, I believe, 3 years of eligibility left. So I think people were projecting maybe a year or two down the road that he would kind of be that offensive lineman that South Carolina needed. Unfortunately, as I said, he got thrust in that role pretty quickly, and unfortunately it didn't pan out for him. And that's not from a lack of effort. I mean, from all indications and listening to him and his media availability, Sidney Fugar seemed like a good guy, seemed like he went out there and worked really hard. He just didn't quite get to the point that South Carolina needed him to, and he's probably well aware of that. So he wants to seek an opportunity to go and go and transfer elsewhere. And again, he made the jump from FCS all the way up to Division I SEC, and that's not made for everyone. Now, it doesn't mean he can't get to that point somewhere down the road, but maybe exploring Group of 5 options would be a little bit more viable for him, going forward. And we'll see what Sidney Fugar ultimately ends up doing. But again, I think that qualifies in that healthy transfer category that you're not too panicked or concerned seeing him enter his name into the portal. And the other one being Keenan Nelson Jr., somebody that started at the end of 2022, got to start at the Gator Bowl, and saw his way into the starting lineup at the beginning of last season, but unfortunately couldn't stick. We talk so much about that slot corner, that nickel spot that South Carolina was kind of a revolving door at a season ago before kind of eventually sticking with Jelon Kilgore later on in the season. Well, Keenan Nelson Jr. was kind of at the forefront of that at the beginning of the year. And, obviously if he would have been, locked down in that role, then he would have never lost it. But South Carolina, ended up kind of mixing things up as the season went along. And Keenan Nelson Jr. just did not end up getting a whole lot of playing time a season ago. So, again, I can understand why he would decide to transfer out and seek an opportunity elsewhere. But again, these are two guys that, you don't want to leave necessarily. But if you had to pick guys on the roster to free up a little bit more space, I don't think anybody would be too upset about these two guys entering their names into the transfer portal. And look, it frees up more scholarships, frees up your opportunity to add more pieces on this team. We, of course, know that Carolina would like to go get another wide receiver, at least one, maybe two. Who knows? Just kind of depending on what's out there. As Beamer has done and staff have done a good job up to this point of building the depth back up in that wide receiver room, because that was a bit of a concern. But we don't quite know how the transfers are going to shake out once we get into the season. I obviously have high expectations for guys like Gage Larvadain, Jared Brown, and Amari Huggins-Bruce, but none of those guys quite fit the mold of what you want your true one wide receiver to be, that being a tall, athletic guy that can go up there and get contested balls and stuff like that. And not to say that Nick Harbor can't end up being that guy. Maybe he will this season, but you just don't know that for sure. So your safer bet would be to go out there and get somebody that has been around college football for a while, that kind of has that experience that you're looking for, that can hopefully slide into that role and, provide good size and athleticism at that one spot for South Carolina at wide receiver. Now, I know that they were, there's speculation and reporting on a couple of those type of guys in the transfer portal that South Carolina is looking at. We'll have to see what comes to fruition from that. But as I've said before, even if South Carolina got nobody out of the portal through the spring cycle, which, they're going to get somebody. I don't have any doubts about that. Even if, though, they got nobody, nothing else was out of this team, I still feel like most of us feel pretty good about where this team is at as of right now. And, again, hopefully they can add pieces to it and continue to build on what has, been a strong offseason so far for South Carolina that hopefully translates to a good regular season when that does roll around coming up at the start of August. On the flip side of things, men's basketball making a lot of noise in the transfer portal over the course of these past couple weeks. Jordan Butler coming in from, Missouri a season ago, and somebody with really good size that is expected to be an easy contributor for this, for the South Carolina team. He was somebody that, unfortunately was stuck on a really bad team this past year in Missouri that could not find a way to win, games in conference. But he's got the size that you just can't teach. 7 foot tall, 230 pounds, as listed by ESPN, and a Greenville kid, somebody that's looking for an opportunity to play closer to home, and that seems to be exactly what he's found here at South Carolina. So plenty of reason to be excited from him. And then Nick Pringle announcing his commitment to the Gamecocks over the weekend as well, as he's somebody that people have been very high on since he entered his name into the transfer portal. Obviously, another South Carolina kid from Seaside, I believe, that is transferring over here from Alabama. I saw that he was out there at the baseball game as well. So making his way around campus, around the city, and getting an opportunity to come back home and play for South Carolina. Obviously, an athletic big man, stepped into a bigger role this past season. Guy that can be a double-double machine for South Carolina, good size as well, 6'10". So a couple of monsters that South Carolina has added, to the roster for 2023. In addition to guys that you have coming back like Colin Murray Boyles, Jacoby Wright, guys like that we already know what they bring to the table as members of this team, and hopefully it bodes well for a good season going forward. But I think this just speaks volumes to what Lamont Paris has been able to do in his short time here at South Carolina, that, the winning itself was fantastic, exceeding everyone's expectations this season, getting a chance to play in the NCAA tournament even though you got bounced in game number 1. There's a lot of momentum coming away from this past season, year number 2 in Lamont Paris, that the team should be carrying into year number 3, and so far so good as far as the transfer portal goes. But more than anything else, and again, it's important to note that both Butler and Pringle are South Carolina kids. Lamont Paris is just making this program attractive. You know what I mean? And we live in such a talent-rich state in South Carolina that sees so many phenomenal talents get spread all around the country. And yes, basketball is a sport that you're working with really limited numbers, so to think you're going to go out there and get every single one of these guys, that's crazy, and that's not going to happen. But the fact that you're getting these guys that have been around college basketball for a few years, and it's so interesting to think when you're coming out of high school, your priorities are maybe in a different place. After you played a year or two, a couple years, maybe you're not getting as much playing time as you want. Your priorities shift, and you want to go to a program that is going to develop you, get you where you want to go as an individual player, and one that is hopefully going to be successful and compete for championships as well. And it really seems like guys are buying in to Coach Paris on both of those fronts of the development as well as the overall success. And particularly when you talk about these in-state kids deciding to either stay home with guys like Cam Scott, decommitting from Texas and recommitting and officially committing to South Carolina last week. And then these guys that are, transferring in-state natives, getting a chance to play closer to home for a program that is finally back on the upswing after several years of that not being the case. So great movement on all fronts for South Carolina as far as the transfer portal goes, and we'll keep keen eye on what happens in the football transfer portal because, again, the portal window closes tomorrow for putting your name in, but there's still the opportunity to pluck guys out of the portal going forward. And I know South Carolina, Coach Beamer, Coach Loggins, Coach White, and all those position coaches are hard at work of figuring out which guys, A, would be interested, and 2, would be a good fit for what South Carolina is trying to do on both sides of the ball, and hopefully we can get some good transfers in there to further elevate what's hopefully a good season upcoming for the Gamecocks in 2024. We'll get back into some more NFL draft talk. The entire weekend was a mixed bag of results for certain teams. Mel Kiper has put out his winners and losers of draft weekend, and one of the losers probably shouldn't surprise you. We'll dive into some of that coming up next and what it means going forward for respective teams in the NFL, as well as talk to our guy Mike Uva coming up the bottom of the hour at 10:30, get his recap of Gamecocks in the NFL draft. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday morning here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you on this Monday morning. Wrapping up a busy weekend. Not the last weekend we're going to be hearing from the NFL for a while, but the conversations around the NFL going forward for the next couple of weeks, months are going to be about projections of what these new draftees are going to be for their respective teams, and starting to speculate what this season's going to look like going forward. We do have the schedule announcements, I believe, also coming up very soon. I believe in May for for the NFL of figuring out what what the season's going to look like and who's going to be playing when and where this upcoming season. So again, as I talked about a little bit earlier with Preston, the NFL finds a way to always put themselves at the front of the headlines no matter what's going on, and are never out of the public eye, which again, they're a machine. They continue to print money, and no surprise there. So coming away from the weekend, every program or every organization is going to feel different types of ways about their draft class. Now, of course, people within the building are going to feel like they've got the best class and it's going to lead to a lot of success going forward. Not always the case. Some organizations are going to benefit a lot from the guys they brought in, some not so much. And Mel Kiper, who of course is the trusted voice of ESPN when it comes to the NFL draft, put out his grades this past weekend for every team and how they drafted. Now his grades go all the way from an A, there's no A plus, just an A, all the way down to a C minus in terms of draft grades for these respective organizations, all the way down to a C, not a C minus, for these respective organizations in the NFL. I will start off with the A distinction because there is only 2 regular A's. There are some A minuses, but 2 just outright A's as far as overall grades for the NFL draft. And he puts the Arizona Cardinals at the very top. Again, this is an organization that has struggled, to say the least, the past couple of years. They of course moved on from Cliff Kingsbury as their head coach at the end of the 2022 season and brought in Jonathan Gannon from the defending NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles to come in and be their head coach. So there's still a lot of growing, still a lot of things, being moved forward, with this organization, but they seem to have drafted pretty well. And one of their glaring needs to add a weapon for Kyler Murray out there at quarterback, as he was out for half the season last year with an injury. Regardless, they did not have a receiver pull in more than 600 yards a season ago. And they got Marvin Harrison Jr., as many expected them to, with their first-round pick, in the draft. And he's going to be an easy target for Kyler Murray out there in Arizona. We'll see how that translates as far as throwing the ball goes. I do think they also just did a really good job of using their draft equity. They had 11 total picks in this draft, which is tied for the most in the entire league. And when you look at everything that they did, and defensively, they struggled a lot last year as well. They had the lowest graded defense per Pro Football Focus, and needed to address a lot of different areas of concern with that team. And they went out there and spent 6 of their 11 picks on defensive products, headlined by Darius Robinson at the back half of the first round, edge player out of Missouri, going all the way down to Jaden Davis, their last pick in the 7th round out of Miami. So they addressed a lot of needs on defense that we'll see how that translates over to this upcoming season. And again, you have to wait and see how all these players are obviously going to pan out. But in terms of using your draft capital and equity to your advantage, I think Arizona did a really good job of that this past weekend. The other team getting an A, Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this is a team that, again, just 2 years ago was in the Super Bowl, fell off hard at the end of last season, and obviously had that embarrassing loss in the postseason down there in Tampa Bay, taking on the Buccaneers, but needed some help on defense. This was a team that defensively struggled in the back half of last year and addressed those needs right away. They got Quinyon Mitchell, the cornerback out of Toledo in the first round that a lot of people very, very high on, obviously being a first-round pick. And then perhaps one of the steals of the draft, Cooper DeJean, the cornerback out of Iowa, that a lot of people had projected in the first round, slid into the second round. The Eagles were able to grab him up with that early pick in the second round, 40th overall in the draft over the course of the weekend. And then just adding some other pieces throughout the weekend. Will Shipley, somebody out of just up the road in Clemson that I think has the potential to make some noise in the NFL. Anais Smith, somebody that we've seen out of Texas A&M that is very speedy and very dangerous when you get the ball in his hands on offense. Johnny Wilson, good tall wide receiver out of Florida State that can make a difference with some of those high-point contested catches in the sixth round. And then add some pieces on defense. Another Clemson guy in Jeremiah Trotter that can make some noise in the middle of their defense as well. Again, according to Mel Kiper, a good draft overall for the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that doesn't need a whole lot to get themselves back on track, but certainly needing some help on the defensive front. And we'll see how that translates to this upcoming season. On the other end of the draft, the bottom tier. And again, there's only one team that had the distinction of earning anything less than a C+, that being none other than my Atlanta Falcons, according to Mel Kiper. And that's headlined by the pick of Michael Penix Jr. in the first round. And again, we talked about this a lot on Friday. It's a pick that just doesn't make a ton of sense. And I have nothing against Michael Penix Jr. I think he's a fantastic quarterback, and I think he has the potential to have a good career in the NFL. But investing a first-round pick and first-round money in a guy that theoretically shouldn't start for you or play significant time for 3 years because of the money and the time that you have tied up in Kirk Cousins doesn't make a lot of sense to me, especially when the Falcons need help on defense from a season ago. Now, yes, the rest of their draft, they went defensive heavy, defensive tackle, edge, defensive tackle, linebacker, and then defensive tackle rounding out their picks in the sixth round with Zion Logue out of Georgia. But I think the ability to get a true game wrecker in the first round, like a Turner out of Alabama, like a Latu in the first round, is something that might come back to bite the Falcons for not taking advantage of that opportunity. And again, you added pieces. And we'll see how they factor in once you get ingrained in your, defensive scheme. But I just, again, as a Falcons fan, I'm not blown away by this draft. And I think, your first round pick really sets the tone. And I think the Falcons missed on their opportunity there by not picking up somebody on defense in the first round. But we'll see how all this translates going forward. Again, it's impossible to tell right now coming away from the weekend. But as far as grades go, I can't say I disagree with the Falcons being at the bottom of that list of teams as far as how they drafted this past weekend. Speaking of the draft, 4 Gamecocks taken over the course of the 3 days of the NFL draft. We'll talk about all those guys and more with our guy Mike Uva from Gamecock Central coming up next as the Extra Point rolls along on your Monday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you on this Monday, reacting to all things NFL draft from over the weekend. Now welcoming in on the Love Chevrolet phone lines our guy Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, who's been all over everything Gamecocks in the NFL draft as the weekend progressed. And Mike, first of all, appreciate your time this morning. I was talking in the last segment, Mel Kiper giving out draft grades to all the teams in the NFL, gave the Carolina Panthers a B- overall. And that's obviously an organization that needs a lot of help, and really at the forefront of that was needing to get a young, dynamic wide receiver for Bryce Young to be able to throw to, and there's no doubt they got that with Xavier Legette coming off the board at the end of the first round.
No doubt, and it just shows how much they truly value him to move up into that first round, be able to get him, because, you look at that pick, Buffalo, they needed a wide receiver as well. So, it goes to show they cared. And if you go back, I know fans, unfortunately, they didn't have the ability to be there. But, Tyler, you were there with me. There was other media members there. The Panthers probably had more coaches, more scouts at South Carolina's pro day than any other NFL team. So it just goes to show how valuable they look at X. And certainly they hope that he's going to be able to do that for a young quarterback like Bryce Young.
And obviously, outside of the football playing aspect of it, Xavier Legette's a guy that has an incredible story. Obviously went through a lot before even getting to South Carolina, and spent a lot of time, away from not away from the public eye, but not necessarily at the forefront of what South Carolina was doing. Exposed this past season, and so cool to see him not only get the opportunity to play in the NFL, be a first-round pick, but just be up the road here in Charlotte, playing near family, near friends, and obviously near a lot of Gamecock fans as well. So hopefully that translates to a great career at the next level.
It's perfect for a guy like him for multiple reasons. But I think first and foremost, he's a guy that he's very simple. He's a very simple guy. Now, certainly getting drafted in the first round, he's going to have a little bit more money in his back pocket and be able to have some more things. But I think the thing about X is, and a lot of people already know this, he's going to do so much good. Not just in that Charlotte community off the field. He's going to do some good back in Mullins. He's going to do some good back in this community. Obviously, he needs to focus on being able to be the best football player he can be so he can have a nice long career in the NFL. But I think just getting to know him, back to just a couple of years ago. Before X was going off on the field, he was giving back in the community. I remember the Garnet Trust events, taking the kids out a couple of days before Christmas. That's the X that I'll always remember outside of the Xavier Legette that we saw put up incredible numbers during the 2023 season.
After he went off the board at 32, it was a long wait up until Saturday to see the next Gamecock off the board. That was Spencer Rattler at 150 going to the New Orleans Saints. And there's two parts to this. I want to focus on the football part first, because New Orleans is one of those teams that we talked about leading up to the draft as one that could potentially be in the market for a guy like Spencer Rattler. Ends up taking him. Very crowded quarterback room right there already. Guys like Kellen Mond, Nathan Peterman already sitting behind Derek Carr. But kind of reading some of the insiders down there in New Orleans, there is a thought that Spencer Rattler could make serious noise in this quarterback room, even coming in as a fifth-round pick.
Yeah, put Derek Carr aside. They have a lot of quarterbacks in that room. I feel like he could easily beat out to get into at least that top three. You're trying to get to that top three, and then, look, you get in that mix, anything can happen. And I mentioned, put Derek Carr aside simply because, all right, they got the veteran quarterback. You would assume that will be the guy heading into the year. But at some point, if Rattler's able to get to at least that number 2 spot, obviously got to make the team, do everything, which I think he'll be fine there. But you go back to last season, at one point or another, every backup quarterback had to play at some point or another, whether it was one snap, whether it was a quarter, or whatever. So I simply bring that up because I think he's in a great situation. I think he's in a room where he can be able to compete. I think he's going to be able to make some noise in that room. And I think the other thing, too, is if he does well, it's not like he's playing behind a quarterback in Derek Carr who will be there, you would expect, for many, many years. Here's a guy that's been in the league already for a long time. So you come in there, you compete. You don't have to worry about necessarily having to get out there right away. But if you do some good things, you might see the field a little bit sooner rather than later.
As far as the off-the-field stuff goes, of course, Rattler still ended up in a good situation down there in New Orleans, but we were hoping to see him somewhere around the third round, ends up falling into the fifth, and based on, insiders, Ian Rappaport, Pete Thamel, and the like over the course of the weekend, it seems like believe it or not, the Netflix documentary from when he was 17 years old has reared its ugly head once again and affected Spencer Rattler in the eyes of NFL scouts. And I do think it's ridiculous that something like that, something so minuscule from years ago, has cropped up once again, but it did seem to affect Spencer Rattler in terms of where he went in the draft.
It is ridiculous. And I think from a national standpoint, right, if you're not paying attention to the Gamecocks, if you haven't paid attention to Spencer Rattler the way that so many of us here in Columbia have, yeah, you hear that, and it's not going to surprise you. But if you have been in this area, and you don't even have to be a media member to know, that's the complete opposite Spencer Rattler that we saw for 2 years here. And I've said this before on Gamecock Central. When he got here, was there this thought process, at least to me, okay, maybe this guy is a bad apple. Maybe this guy's going to have some issues. Of course, I think a lot of us thought that was a possibility, even though for a guy like Shane Beamer, you'd believe, okay, whatever he's going to do to be able to help the team, he's not going to bring a person in like that. But, just like with any athlete, you're going to do your due diligence. So a couple months by, I reached out to a couple of the players, and I said, hey, how things going? Because in the past, there's been guys in the past, guys have come in, they're just like, yeah, this guy's just not blending well. Instantly, Spencer's awesome. Spencer's awesome, one of the best leaders, one of the best teammates. I can't believe this notion that he's this and that. I was thinking this, but no, he's this. And then you fast forward, and you see what would happen even in games. South Carolina, they have a bad game. It might not have been necessarily Spencer's fault. He would always fall on the sword for his teammates, always protect them. And I think week in and week out, what we saw in front of the cameras, to everything else we heard from behind the scenes, Spencer was the complete opposite of this poor reputation that he received heading into South Carolina. I think, unfortunately, like you said, people just looked at it. It was a lazy notion, didn't do their homework, and they just believed this thing. And I think it was just easier to say as the draft went on, and okay, a guy that's projected to be third and fourth falls to the fifth. It's not like he fell from being like a first-round draft pick to the seventh. But, again, he sits there. People are going to keep making up these things about what happened 5-6 years ago.
Outside of Rattler and Leggett, later on in the draft, we did see Marcellus Dial and Nick Argiulo also get picked up in the later rounds. And obviously, when you're a later round pick, you're going to have a little bit more of an uphill battle in terms of making the roster and finding a spot on the team. And you can speak even more specifically to the Patriots situation with Marcellus Dial going up there. But, good to see those two guys still being able to get picked up late, even in later rounds of the draft.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the Patriots necessarily do with him, because Bill Belichick was there. I'd say, all right, they really, truly value special teams. It's not to say Gerard Mayo, the new football coach for the Patriots, won't, but for his situation, they need defensive backs. So he goes into a situation where they're certainly looking for some depth. I think what will help out Marcellus is two things. One, his versatility, has the ability to play inside if they want to go to a 4-2-5, play that nickel. And he also is a contributor on special teams as a gunner, as many of these Gamecocks have been. With a guy like, Nick Gargiulo, what more can you say? What more can you really say about him, Tyler? I mean, here's a guy that comes in, does everything that this team needs. Certainly the offensive line position had their ups and downs because of a lot of injuries. But, again, another versatile guy, can play multiple positions, played even left tackle at Yale. And he's just tough guy, dealt with a lot of injuries last year that I think people weren't even aware of. I don't know how he was able to grip the football at times with his snapping hand. I mean, that hand was so busted up, and a lot of people don't even know that. But he did that because he knew the offensive line was so hurt that he had to do what he could to help his team. He's just old school football tough. So two great guys right there. Versatile, I think, is the big thing that stands out when I think of both Dial and Gargiulo.
When you look at the guys that were drafted, last one for you here, Mike, you have a wide receiver, you have a quarterback, you have a defensive back, and you have an offensive lineman. 4 guys total being taken over the course of the 7 rounds of the draft. When you look at this from a value of what this does for the South Carolina program, and being able to tout a first rounder, being able to tout your highest selected quarterback in 30 some odd years, as well as having 2 other guys go in the later rounds, what does this do for Coach Beamer and this program going forward by having these guys get drafted and hopefully have a lot of success in the league going forward?
Well, I think there are people that you can point to and say, hey, look what happened this past year. Look what happened the year before. And I think what people need to realize is this too. some of these players, yes, you want to call them quote unquote, they were Will Muschamp guys. They were guys that were recruited by Muschamp. You can say that. Okay, that's absolutely okay. And some of these guys, I believe that regardless if Beamer came here or not, they would have been in the NFL. But there's also some guys that I don't know if they would have took that next step. And I don't know if they would have had that same opportunity. And I want to go too far back, but I think of a guy like Nick Muse. I think of a guy that came back for an extra year to play on special teams, and what happens? He ends up getting drafted by the Vikings. I don't think that would have happened. I don't think he would have been able to get drafted if he hadn't had an opportunity to play special teams the way he did. So I think that there's a lot of these guys that we can look at, especially the guys that have to play special teams just towards the back end. I mean, a guy like Kevin Harris last year. But Marcellus Dial, even some of the guys that are getting brought in as undrafted free agents, I think those are the things that they're going to be able to point to more than anything. Now, we have a new special teams coordinator coming in, but guess what? Joe Camillus, he has a pretty good resume of coaching in the NFL over 30 years in special teams. So I think being able to use these guys as examples, I think will be able to help them. And again, for Torrey Gray, I mean, what a phenomenal job he's done since he's been here. And some of the guys that they've been able to develop, I think development's the other part too. Okay, this guy may have been recruited by Muschamp, but he's been developed by Torian Gray. He's been developed by our coach, this coach, Dal Loggins, what he was able to do for Spencer Rattler, and the things that Spencer even talked about. Some of the scouts, what they were talking about, hey, this guy, you could see it, that he had a chance to work with an NFL OC.
Great weekend overall for the Gamecocks, and always appreciate the insight, Mike, and we'll check in with you later on down the road.
All right, Tyler, appreciate it.
All right, Mike Uva from Gamecock Central. We'll come back. We'll wrap up today's edition of The Extra Point and get some more thoughts coming away from the draft as well as you're listening to The Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you here on your Monday on the Game. Coming up in a few minutes, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. We'll get Wes Mitchell and Chris Clark in here, get their thoughts on everything that happened this weekend with the Gamecocks in the draft, as well as the wild baseball series we saw out of Founders Park. By the way, next baseball game coming up is Wednesday evening, taking on East Tennessee State out at Founders Park. Pregame coverage will start at 6:15 for a 6:30 first pitch, and it's going to be a short week as South Carolina will then head on the road, taking on Missouri coming up on Friday, going out throughout the rest of the weekend, where we hope they continue the momentum from what they were able to have coming away from beating Kentucky this past weekend. Outside of the 4 Gamecocks that got drafted over the weekend, again, Leggett in the first round, Rattler in the 5th, Dial in the 6th, and Gargiulo with the penultimate pick. He was 1 pick away from being Mr. Irrelevant in the 7th round. Had a couple of Gamecocks also get picked up as undrafted free agents, and a few with rookie mini camp invites, coming away from draft weekend. Trey Knox with an undrafted free agent contract with the Minnesota Vikings. Amirian Brown, one with the Cleveland Browns. Funny enough, Brown to the Browns. Tyreek Johnson with an undrafted free agent deal with New York Jets. And then De'Carrion Joyner gets a mini camp invite to both Seattle and New Orleans, and then Jordan Strong getting one with Tennessee and Kansas City. So these are guys looking to stick on NFL rosters, getting the opportunity to come in there and compete and, show what they're made of. I do think, Trey Knox, maybe a little surprising. He was somebody that we had potentially getting drafted in one of the later rounds. Obviously did not ended up being selected. And we'll see what we can do up there in Minnesota and see if he can stick as an undrafted free agent. The Amirian Brown thing is interesting to me from the standpoint of, and we talked about this last week, where Mike Yuva of Gamecock Central was talking with Amirian Brown a while back about his potential at playing at the next level. And he brought up the new kickoff rules in the NFL and how he felt like that could benefit somebody like him as being a smaller, speedier guy to potentially sticking on one of these rosters. And he he did a little bit of kick returning and punt returning in his time here at South Carolina. And if he can get into a camp like or get into an organization like the Cleveland Browns and be able to maybe specialize in something like that, that could go a long way. Now, we'll see what ends up happening there, but that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on in terms of what he could potentially do at the next level. And a guy like De'Carrion Joyner getting the mini camp invite to Seattle and New Orleans. He's somebody that literally has seen and done a little bit of everything from an offensive standpoint here at South Carolina, and hopefully that bodes well for his opportunity to play at the next level as well, and hopefully he can stick with one of those teams. And then Tyreek Johnson, Jordan Strong, 2 athletic guys, and we'll see how they slide in with those respective organizations. Once they get in there and can prove what they can do. Now, the good thing about being an undrafted free agent is you get to kind of pick, your option depending on if a couple of different teams are offering you opportunities to come in and sign with them. You can pick which opportunity fits you the best, and where you think you have a better chance of sliding into one of those rosters, as opposed to maybe getting picked in one of those later rounds where you don't have that option and you have to go into whatever situation that you're brought into. But, hopefully all these guys can find their way onto NFL rosters and, can be a billboard for success for future, recruiting classes and everything like that. Because that's what, as a program, you can hang your hat on, is being able to say, hey, if you come here, we're going to get you to the NFL, which is what just about every single high school kid coming out is ultimately aspiring to do. Yes, they want to win national championships. Yes, they want to, have success at the college level, but ultimately they want to hear that you can get them to playing on Sundays. And South Carolina, again, being able to boast 4 draft picks this past year, including a first-rounder he's able to get, that is good promotion for your program, and hopefully that translates going forward as well. And, what they're able to sell to future recruits and, getting guys to come in here and buy into what Shane Beamer has built here at at South Carolina. Plenty more thoughts on the draft, as well as what happened with Gamecock baseball over the course of the weekend and the weird series that was against Kentucky out there at Founders Park. Wes Mitchell and Chris Clark going to jump in here with me. Coming up next for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. We'll rehash all of these things, as well as talk more about the transfer portal. As again, it was a good week, really, overall for Gamecock basketball, as well as so far so good in terms of the transfer portal for things on the football front. So we'll jump at all that coming up in the next hour, as it is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. That'll do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Captain Dave on the outside of the glass. I'm Tyler Head, along with you on your Monday, continuing to react to what happened with the NFL draft here on The Game. You got us. Yeah, I got you. All right, going live in just a second. Yeah, that's fine. Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you on this Monday morning. Plenty to react to, Chris. We're not used to sitting this close together.
We're not. It's a little
different.
A little different.
We're shaking it up here. That's all right.
I'm uncomfortable. Wes sitting in between us this time.
I don't smell bad, do I?
No, you don't. I might.
I think I'm all right. Put on my deodorant this morning. But regardless, a very, very busy weekend on a lot of fronts. Got plenty to get to. Obviously, Gamecock baseball with a big series win over Kentucky, as well as several Gamecocks getting their name called in the NFL draft. I just talked with Mike Yuba in that last hour of great to see so many of those guys getting drafted, as well as many of them, picking up undrafted free agent contracts as well with respective NFL teams. But, the headline of the weekend, we talked about Xavier Legette plenty on Friday with him going in the first round on Thursday night, but a lot of conversation around Spencer Rattler having to wait a little bit longer than we thought he was going to have to, going in the 5th round, 150th pick overall to the New Orleans Saints, a situation that is pretty good overall, as we feel like that's a place that he could go in there and make an impact, potentially find his way into a starting role, but unfortunately fell a couple rounds later than we thought he was going to.
Spencer was the guy. I was thinking about this earlier. It kind of played out most of the draft exactly like we thought. We knew Xavier Legette was going to be the first guy up and that he was going to be either very late round 1 or pretty early round 2. And so that ends up happening. In fact, Panthers trade up to get him.
Right.
So he goes late round 1. You figured the next guy was going to be Spencer, somewhere in that mid-round range. Then Marcellus would be probably 5th, 6th, and then Gargiulo, if he got drafted, would be probably 7th or a priority undrafted free agent. And so all those things happen, right? Dial 6, Gargiulo 7. With Spencer, he was the one where it was kind of a little bit tougher. Now, one reason for that is because he's a quarterback.
Yeah.
And so you kind of expect the unexpected in the draft with quarterbacks. You'll see guys go higher than you think. You'll see guys slide. And then another part was just Spencer was, when I say polarizing, I don't mean that in a negative sense at all. It was kind of, there were different opinions on where he might go. And it looked like at first, guys, that, okay, you get through the first round, you get through 12 picks, and there's, 6 quarterbacks taken?
Yep.
Right, this is a dream scenario for Spencer and for Joe Milton and for Michael Pratt from Tulane. You're like, this sets up perfect, man, because if a team needs a quarterback, now, even if they didn't want to, they might feel like, well, we got to go a little bit higher here. Instead, Spencer was literally the next guy up. But you went from pick 12, Bo Nix, to pick 150.
The longest gap in NFL history between quarterbacks being taken.
And that was crazy. And, and I know we'll get into this, and I know, Wes, you have some opinions on this, as do I, and I'm sure Tyler does too. The reasoning that was stated, restated again by more than one national reporter, it was a longer wait. It was on the back end of the wait that you would expected, but he's got an opportunity, and I think he'll make the most of it.
And Wes, this is a team in the Saints that we talked about leading up to the draft that we thought, Spencer Rattler could potentially go to, maybe in one of those early rounds, but regardless, ends up there in the 5th round. And, that's a very crowded quarterback room. But reading, some of the people that cover this team on the daily, there's a lot of thoughts that Spencer Rattler could make some serious noise with the Saints right away.
Yeah, I mean, guys, I think at the end of the day, it maybe ends up working out somewhat okay for Spencer. I mean, I think obviously we all sat there and you kind of felt bad for him as it played out because, like Chris detailed, when this thing started, you were saying this is playing out perfectly for Spencer Rattler. And then, I think it just sort of droned on and on and on. You're like, all right, at what point is the guy going to get drafted? And, I think this is something we've seen Spencer in his time at South Carolina use doubters as kind of a chip on his shoulder. I think this is something that, not that he needed any extra motivation anyway, but something he can use to maybe fuel him even more. But I do think I always kind of felt that if he could go to a place that had maybe an older quarterback who was kind of established as the starter, but maybe was not solidified as a top-tier starter in the NFL, or maybe just had a couple of years left, maybe that would be a good situation. And that's kind of what you end up with there, with Derek Carr as the quarterback. So maybe not the worst scenario for Spencer Rattler. And guys, real quick, y'all mentioned Leggett. I don't consider myself an NFL expert, but last week I made the comment that I didn't really understand why the Panthers traded up one spot into the first round. Well, doing some reading after our show on Friday, I did want to point out there was a very specific reason for that, and that's because first-round picks, that first deal actually can go 5 years instead of 4 years. So there was a very specific reason that the Panthers wanted to go ahead and lock Leggett in officially as a first-rounder as opposed to a second-rounder, even if it was really the only difference of one pick.
No, good. That's good reporting there, Wes.
There you go.
Yeah, very
it's
nice.
almost like it's your job or something.
Yeah, yeah.
I should have known that beforehand, but that I watched the Panthers press conference after the fact, and Dan Morgan, who Chris and I watched, be a stud linebacker for the Panthers back in the day, is now basically like running the show when Tepper isn't interrupting him, I'm sure. But, I think to hear that, I was like, okay, that makes complete sense. So as big as those wide receiver contracts are getting these days in terms of free agents, essentially that allows the Panthers to have him on that rookie deal for one extra year I think it's written as a team option. Don't quote me on that.
That's correct. I think that's right.
Yeah. So that did make complete sense. But yeah, guys, back to Spencer. I do think at the end of the day that it may end up working out for him. And Chris, Tyler, I wanted to get y'all's thoughts on Shane Beamer basically it got to the point he had to respond to some of the reporting from the NFL draft, quote unquote, experts from what these teams were leaking to them about why Spencer was dropping. And it almost, like, not to be a complete homer, but it's almost just laughable to me that we are still talking on ESPN of all places, not random people on Twitter, that we're still talking about a Netflix show from when Spencer Rattler was 17 years old and was obviously just an immature kid at the time.
It seems like, I think you make a good point. It's like, you log on to like Twitter and you'll see like the Oklahoma fans that are still mad, or like Georgia, Tennessee, Clemson, and they might say those same things. I saw Spencer on that Netflix show, like people that have never met him, never interacted with him. And here's the more important thing, right? Whatever you thought of that show, how many years ago was that?
So, because he came out in the 2019 class, and
that's right.
I'm assuming that a lot of that stuff was done. I watched the entire show, but I'm assuming a lot of that was done prior to his senior year of high school. So we're talking about
7 years ago,
fall of 2018.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there.
So we've got to stop doing the thing, and this is like we won't turn this into like a political show, but like from a societal standpoint, you're now expected to be like perfect.
Sure.
And we cannot show growth.
And here's the thing to me. I understand these scouts and these people within the organizations wanting to vet all of these draft picks to the degree to make sure they're getting the right guy in their organization and they're not going to have any problems. But it's insane to me that you can't expect somebody to have grown. And again, I've had the opportunity to be in here with Rattler for our shows and see him around the studio a couple times. You guys have obviously spent a lot more time with him, but you ask anybody close to this program here at South Carolina, they will tell you, and Wes, you can speak to this as well, it's a night and day difference from who that kid was 6-7 years ago and who the guy is now that got drafted on Saturday.
Yeah, and so for anybody who's around like me and Chris's age, do y'all ever have so Facebook became a thing when I was like just getting into college, and the little thing on Facebook where it sort of is like 15 years ago you posted this status, and do y'all ever read that thing and just be like, I'm about to delete this, even though it's from 15 years ago?
It happens every time. All the time, dude.
And it's not even like I said anything bad, but just like I'm cringing, like, what a moron. Like, what was I talking about? And so, like, I can't imagine being like, I can't imagine the public having any video of me when I was a junior, and like we all are cringeworthy at that age. Like, I don't know. It's just it's silly to me to even think about that affecting someone's draft stock when it wasn't like I get it if the guy like committed a crime or something or just did something that was just that he's a complete disaster to society or something, like that maybe is one thing, but just he was an immature kid and has admitted in interviews like, hey, I've grown up since then. Like I don't know. I don't get it. And also I see people saying, well, of course the staff, of course Shane Beamer, of course those guys are going to come to the defense of Spencer Rattler. So there's this thing called silence. And if the staff did not feel the way they do about Spencer Rattler and they were deep down in the back of their minds thinking, yeah, some of these things are correct, they would just be quiet. They would just be silenced. They would not feel the need to come to his aid. You see lots of I thought it was interesting too, guys, seeing several of the SEC network and kind of ESPN analysts that are more regional and have covered South Carolina throughout the last 2 years as well, sort of come to Spencer Rattler's aid online as well. Just be like, this is not the same person you witnessed when he was 17 years old or whatever it was. Consummate professional is Chris. I know you can speak to this, man. He has carried himself like an NFL quarterback from the moment you and I first interviewed him right after he announced his transfer to South Carolina.
Yeah, and I don't even. It's one thing to be like, Pete Thamel and Ian Rappaport should not have gone on TV and said that, right? But you know what? I tend to think it's just more lazy work on the part of the scouts. Like they didn't call over to the building and ask. Now, maybe they did. And maybe, Ian Rappaport in his quote even said, it's unbelievable to me that this many scouts mentioned it.
Sure.
And it's like, okay, it is kind of unbelievable.
They were passing along the information they were given. It wasn't them saying
They're trying to explain it. And, will we ever really know? Because remember, Pete Thamel's tweet, the first thing was concern about his height and a 5.040, which that seems kind of ridiculous to me. Both of them, especially the 40.
We know he's not a speed demon.
Yeah, but he can run a little. So which one of those is it? I don't know. I would have, if the scouts came out and said, which I don't agree with this, but they would have said, you know what? We just don't think he's that good.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. But like, if you say, I just can't get that vision out of my head. Well, can you get the things out of your head with people who've actually been like committed crimes and arrested, like Wes said, and then you still employ those people a lot of the time in the NFL.
That's the thing to me, and Preston and I were talking about this on the early game this morning, and I'd completely forgotten about this. His name popped in my head. Y'all remember Randy Gregory coming out of Nebraska?
Oh, yeah.
And all of the red flags around him? He dropped to the second round.
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield got arrested when he was at Oklahoma. Still the first overall pick. It's so funny the type of things that get overlooked, and then you say something. Which, by the way, again, let's put ourselves in Spencer Rattler's shoes as a 17-year-old, 5-star, projected as the best quarterback in America coming out of high school. Yeah, you probably have a little bit of an ego. Yeah, your head's probably a little bit big at that point in time, so you probably say some things that you probably regret years down the line. But again, this dude's a completely different person now. And again, you guys can speak to it more than I can, but just in the interactions that I've had with him, very kind, very humble, very nice, and carries himself in a good way that I think he's going to be an immaculate professional and is going to be able to have a long career in the NFL as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's he did everything right at South Carolina for the 2 years he was here. I can honestly say I didn't hear anything negative, and all our interactions with him, what you hear in that building, and that spoke volumes. I mean, Wes hit on this earlier, but when your coach goes on social media and defends you, you don't have to do that. And in fact, it very much behooves a college coach to be honest about his guys.
Sure.
So that when they're contacting you saying, what do you think? You don't want to be lying about it. And Shane Beamer's a believer.
More to unpack from the draft weekend for Gamecocks coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
Got you. Well, you don't want to be without the game, but you know what else you don't want to be without, guys? Lunch from Firehouse Subs. It is 11:15 a.m. Eastern Time, and it's making me hungry sitting here looking at the menu for Firehouse Subs. I've basically got it memorized by now, but nonetheless, it still makes me hungry every time I look at it. You can use the Rapid Rescue to go. To avoid the wait and order online, they'll have your sandwich ready to go. You'll have your chips ready to go. You can grab your drink and use the machine there to get whatever you want. You can order catering, you can order lunch, you can order dinner. You can check out the new barbecue Cuban sandwich, which is Southern Roots with a Cuban twist. It is here at Firehouse Subs for a limited time only. 14 Midlands locations. There's one convenient to you no matter where you are. FirehouseSubs.com, or use the Firehouse Subs app to earn yourself some rewards on future purchases. Use the Rapid Rescue to go, FirehouseSubs.com, or the Firehouse Subs app.
Hey, Wes. We only had the one live read built in, so we're gonna have to work some in. Do you want to do a gold line or a classic city in this, or the classic roofing in this next segment? I know. We're doing what we can. All right, I'll work it in at the end. It sounds good. I mean, you can tell you're not here, but it's not bad. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you. Reacting to all things draft. Again, we unpacked a lot of the Spencer Rattler conversation there in that first segment. He was not the last Gamecock to come off the board, though. A couple guys getting picked up in later rounds. Marcellus Dial going in the 6th round to the New England Patriots. And then Nick Arzullo, the penultimate pick of the draft, not quite Mr. Irrelevant, but almost, going in the 7th round to the Denver Broncos. And these are a couple guys that we knew were going to get drafted at some point over the weekends, and obviously being in the later rounds, do have a little bit of a hill to climb there by making the team and competing for spots. But good to see both those guys get their name called over the course of the weekend.
Yeah, that was, really happy for both of those guys. And I was thinking about this earlier. Marcellus Dial was a guy that even out of junior college, and Wes, definitely adds some context to this, but junior college kid out of Georgia military, originally from Woodruff, and he was like a low 3-star guy on the recruiting services after he got to junior college. This was a guy that was kind of an unknown, like in high school, goes out to junior college, just continually gets better and better. And then even by the time he got to South Carolina, you could see, the progression of Marcellus Dial to where, 2022. Again, remember that 2022 team, they had Darius Rush, Cam Smith, a couple guys playing in the league. Marcellus Dial was basically your third corner. And he ended up playing more snaps than both of those guys. And at that point, and with how he finished the year, you're like, okay, this is a guy that's going to step in 2023. He's going to be the guy. He's going to be the lead corner, and he's going to have a chance to go play in the league. And super happy for him to get that opportunity as well.
Yeah, guys, I was very curious to see where Sell would go because I thought he was another one of those guys I thought could maybe move up a little bit, maybe higher than where he ended up going. I thought he actually quietly had a really good final year at South Carolina, and that's a position – you make a mistake and people notice you, or you sit over there and lock down your guy for an entire game and nobody even mentions you if they don't really kind of dive into the film. And so, I think for him, he's going to probably have a chance to stick in the league. There's 100 different variables that will determine your success, but I do think there's a lot to like about Dial's opportunity in the NFL. And then, Nicky G too, for a late round pick, I did wonder – I was going to say, first of all, this is a guy who has the experience at Yale where he's at some point in his career played center, guard, and tackle. Now, I think he's definitely more of an interior guy at the NFL, but just having that experience, the fact he went to Yale, you assume that you're getting a pretty sharp guy. Then you meet him and you're like, all right, this guy is way smarter than I am. So I think that kind of plays well for him at the next level But these NFL teams, they have such limited rosters going into a game week. So having a guy who kind of has that complete understanding of the entire offensive line could maybe go play another position on the line in sort of a pinch for you, and obviously is going to be a good leader, good off the field guy as well. That probably plays well, I think, for Nick G. And I'm curious. I wonder if there was a little bit of, as we know, Greg Atkins' son plays for the Broncos, and when you start getting to those late picks, 6th, 7th round, you're taking flyers on guys. You're kind of, all right, we know there's some questions here, but this is what we look for in a guy when we're going to take a chance. I wonder if former South Carolina offensive line coach Greg Atkins, of course, also still on staff, and his knowledge of who Nick G is possibly could have played a role there. Maybe I'm grasping at straws, but it did kind of strike me as interesting that he ends up at Denver.
Absolutely. And I talked about this with Mike Yuva in the last hour. This draft as a whole, a good, showing for South Carolina, getting 4 guys drafted in multiple different spots. But I think Gargiulo in particular is very interesting because, again, he's a guy that comes in from Yale. Going from FCS to the SEC is a sizable jump, and he was able to come in here and prove himself and do good enough to get drafted. And I think that is something that is enticing to potential guys looking to transfer into South Carolina that, hey, you can come here, prove yourself, and get the opportunity to play at the next level like Nick Gargiulo did.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes to show that, you don't want to, if you recruited an entire roster of guys from FCS or from the Ivy League, then you're going to have an Ivy League program. But every single year in the NFL, whether it's drafted guys or guys you're sitting there watching Monday Night Football, and here's a guy from some tiny school or an Ivy League or an FCS out there making plays. Even in the year 2024, it has never, the data has never been better. Shannon Terry from On 3 was talking about this a lot over the weekend. In the first round of the draft, there are a lot of guys where you look back and go, that guy was a 5-star out of high school. And so this isn't the 1980s where you're sending VHS tapes and you're having to definitely go scout guys in person. The amount of data that we have is better than it's ever been. But half of those first-round guys are probably still going to bust, at some point or another. And you're still going to have guys, whether it's round 1, round 4, round 7, or undrafted free agents who are going to end up being really, really good football players at literally the highest level. So, when they took Nick Gargiulo, you kind of do some research and go, this looks like a guy who might can help. And I remember as soon as he got here and you started hearing some returns from the weight room and then returns from practice, you heard about his toughness and his physicality. Obviously had the size, like Wes said, he had the smarts. And so it ended up being a great take. I mean, if you take a guy in recruiting, high school, junior college, portal, whatever, if you take a guy and he plays well for you and then he plays in the league, you check that box. That was good. That is your goal, to get guys in here who start for you, especially out of the portal, right? You get a guy out of the portal, he's a 1 or 2 year guy. He plays well for you. He goes on to the league. What more can you ask for on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, great weekend overall for South Carolina. And again, hopefully it's a good advertisement for this program and enticing to high school recruits and the like who want to come in here and obviously have their opportunity to play at the next level. As always, we appreciate all of our sponsors here on the game, the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. One of those, Wes, is our friends over at Classic Roofing.
Yeah, go on over to classicroofingsc.com, or you can just give them a call. They're probably listening to the show right now, so you can call them. You can talk about the show with them, and you can talk about your roof. You can do that by hitting 803-590-7870. And what you're going to want to do, you're going to want to do exactly what me and my wife did. That is set up a free estimate at your home. They're going to come out. They're going to climb up on your roof. They're going to get this high-tech drone up there as well, and they're going to look at every single aspect of your roof, and then they're going to tell you, hey, there's a couple little problem areas here. Maybe let's address this. Let's address that. Or it might be, hey, there are no problems whatsoever. And then most importantly, guys, they're going to give you kind of an idea of, hey, this roof has 5 years, 10 years, 15 years left on it. So you and your family can go ahead and be planning for how you can protect that roof, because obviously it is easily one of the most important parts of your home. So again, classicroofingsc.com and 803-590-7870. Huge shout out and thanks to our friends at Classic Roofing.
We'll transition over to the Diamond. It was a interesting weekend, to say the least, out at Founders Park. We'll dive into that and South Carolina's big series win over the Kentucky Wildcats. Coming up, it's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Monday on The Game.
First pitch to Petrie, swung on and skied to deep left center field. The center fielder McCarthy is at the wall. He'll leap. He won't get it. It's out of here, and the Gamecocks passed up a runner on the base paths. Oh, my goodness. Brinling, for some reason, had gone back to first base. I guess he was thinking he would tag up, and that means Ethan Petrie is out as he passed up Brinling on the base paths. So the Gamecocks will get 2 runs out of this home run instead of 3. Mercy me.
Welcome back in. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Ed, Wes Muncher, and Chris Clark along with you. That was Derek Scott on the call. A very weird weekend out at Founders Park, to say the least. Ethan Petrie's almost home run that ended up being just ruled as a single and an unassisted out at first base as he passed Austin Brinling on the base path. Nevertheless, didn't deter South Carolina from winning yesterday's game 10-0 in the final of the 3-game set, beating Kentucky in 2 out of those 3 games. But Wes, I know you wanted to lead off on this. A bizarre situation that you don't see come up too much in terms of runners passing each other on the base path.
Very odd. Tyler, I know you have that memory of yours where you don't forget things. Did you know what the official scoring was going to be on that? Like, did you know how that was scored when it happened?
I did not know that's how it was going to be scored, but it's definitely something that if you're only reading the box score of a game, definitely jumps off the page at you.
Yeah, very, very odd. And I want to say, and first of all, we're gonna get to the weekend that was in terms of the 2 out of 3 top 5 team in the country. One of the craziest baseball games I've ever seen on Friday. Then one of the craziest baseball games I've ever seen on Saturday. And then, of course, just out of nowhere, a blowout win on Sunday. Luckily for South Carolina, this play really did not end up mattering other than being a talking point. But I do feel like our guy, Austin Brinling, is getting a little bit too much heat on social media. A lot of people, what is the guy doing at first? What is going on there? Why is he not running? Why is he in La La Land? And not to pick on Petrie here, but Brinling was actually, I believe, trying to make a heads-up play here. Like, if you listen to that call, that ball was skied into the air. It was a long, high fly ball. Typically, you don't always see somebody tag going first to second. But if that outfielder is camped, if you're in a deep enough park and you have enough speed, which we know Brinling does, you sometimes will see guys basically steal 90 feet by going back and tagging up on a fly ball to like right center. So I think for Brinling, did it end up looking bad for everybody? Of course. But I think he's been taking a little bit of unnecessary heat on this. As Mark Kingston said after the game, ultimately it is on that trail runner to not pass the guy in front of him. So I think one of the beautiful things about baseball is sometimes you just see something you've never seen before. And this was just a very, very odd timing thing where it just really worked out in an unfavorable way for South Carolina.
And we can laugh about it now because it ultimately didn't end up costing South Carolina. And when it happened, I thought, oh, God, this game's going to end up coming down to 1 run, and that's going to be the difference in the game. But, of course, South Carolina ends up picking up the 7-inning run rule victory over, Kentucky in the 3rd game. But it's one of those things that when you go back and watch the replay, as they showed on TV, it's so funny because Petrie's like enjoying the high of seeing it go over the fence, and then he immediately realizes he's passed Austin Brinling and realizes, oh no, what have I done? Because he knew the consequences of his actions. But yes, that's more on Petrie, as Kingston said after the game, that you just got to kind of pay attention to what's going on because that was a long fly ball. So you do have to understand that Brinling was being safe there and trying to see if he needed to tag up on that as opposed to just going ahead and running. But again, didn't end up costing South Carolina, but a learning opportunity nonetheless for Ethan Petrie.
Yeah, it was. And, huge series win because, South Carolina has played just a juggernaut of a schedule, which will continue. Yep. By the way, they've got 3 series remaining. You go at Missouri, got Georgia at home, and then at Tennessee. And so it maybe you could say, hey, it lets up a little bit, which is true. You're not playing 3 top 5, top 10 opponents, but Missouri swept Florida.
Based on RPI.
Based on RPI, yes. Some really good teams, which will continue. And so this team gets over the 500 mark. they really, guys, have really all their goals in front of them as far as just being able to – ultimately, you want to be able to host a regional. You know, you've got that in front of you. You're going to have the benefit when it comes to seeding and things like that. Again, as long as they can progress in a positive direction here, you're going to have the benefit of the committee knowing, my goodness, look at this team's strength of schedule. You know, Kentucky was, number 2 in the RPI?
Yep.
They had not been shut out all year. And I think it says something, y'all. I mean, you get to the last game. It's a rubber match. You just had 2 extremely emotional games that Mark Kingston pointed out. Either of those games could have gone either way. If you're South Carolina or Kentucky, you could have been 2-0 or 0-2 after those games. You split them. You get to a big-time Game 3, and you're able to not only win it, but win it in a pretty dominant fashion from a pitching and hitting standpoint. It was just kind of a complete performance, I thought.
Yeah, and guys, I think if you look at this series, we may kind of look back on it and be like, that's the one that really springboarded South Carolina into not only the end of conference play, but into postseason play as well. I thought Mark Kingston made a great point, and that was that, look, you talk about sort of these quad 1 games and how, you know, that can be any team in the top 25, basically. And if you're playing them at home, it's, you know, quad 1 or whatever. And so his point was, we're not just playing top 25 or top 30 teams. It still all counts as quad 1, but South Carolina has been playing top 5 teams and multiple ones at that. And then, of course, in baseball, you play 3-game series. So they're just racking up RPI, building sometimes close losses, sometimes wins along the way. And so I do think when the committee looks back, they're gonna see that South Carolina, as up and down as this season has been, is building a great case to be a regional host. And I thought something – we saw 2 things that could have long-term effects from this weekend. One, South Carolina's moved to a more offensive-oriented lineup, including, moving a first baseman to third base, a third baseman to shortstop. Now, granted, those guys do have history playing those positions, at least in practice and growing up. But I was kind of questioning, what is Kingston doing here? How much defense have you sacrificed? Those guys answered. There was a great offensive weekend. And then the other thing I'll say, how about, guys, Dylan Eskew? If he can give South Carolina what he's given them the last 2 weeks, that could be a huge boost for this team that has been looking for consistency from their weekend staff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I ask you, we've gone in these past couple weekend series as most series, this season with the TBA on Sunday, but I think Eskew has more than earned his spot in that weekend rotation with what he was able to do on Sunday. Going back to Arkansas the past weekend as well, a good outing there, despite the fact that South Carolina did end up losing that game. Carolina jumps up a few spots in the AP poll from 24th up to 15th. They have not released the latest field of 64 projections, but I imagine, if nothing else, South Carolina is still going to be sitting at that number 15 spot, projected to host a regional, maybe even moving up a few spots there as well. And again, lots of opportunities ahead of them, playing good teams in Tennessee and Georgia, as well as a tough road series this weekend at Missouri to continue to climb and put themselves in a better position for the postseason ahead.
Yeah, no doubt. And Tyler, so you mentioned earlier, well, if you look at the RPI, you don't have to, just off the top of your head, where are Missouri, Georgia, Tennessee? You got any ideas to RPI?
So I can tell you that both Tennessee and Georgia are in the top 10. Let me see where.
See, and that's one of the, especially like with Georgia, like, that they've got the masher.
Sure.
He's gonna hit a home run about every game.
Right.
At least.
That's Tyler's favorite player.
Tyler's favorite player. That's right. There you go, Wes. Way to work that in.
I'm scrolling here. I'm trying to see where Missouri is. They are certainly far down the list. So
they're last in the division.
Yeah.
But I think they swept Florida.
They did.
Missouri is one of those weird places to play.
It's never easy.
Where you go on the road. I remember Kentucky used to be like this. Like, even before they've obviously taken a big step up. They're really, really good this year. But there's times in the years past where, we're going to Lexington. That should be 2 wins, maybe a sweep, and then you go there and just play terrible. Right? It's kind of a house of horrors. Missouri is one of those tough places to play, but you start looking at it and you go, what if you can win 2 of those series? What if you can win all 3?
Right.
I mean, you get the sense like you're in really, really good shape if you can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we build momentum coming off the series win against Kentucky that, theoretically got over the hump for something that Coach Kingston's talked about a lot these past couple weeks. And you got a midweek game against East Tennessee, and then before you head on the road out there to come up. By the way, Missouri clocks in at 92 in the RPI, so not terrible, but certainly not up to the standard of what you've seen these past couple weeks. But hopefully don't take them too lightly going into this weekend. We will come back. We'll wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. A lot of stuff happening in the transfer portal from a football and basketball standpoint. We'll have that coming up. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour here on the Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, West Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you for a few more minutes here. As always, you can check us out on The Game TV, sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. And Integrated Media can do a whole lot of things for you, not just camera setups. And Chris, you can always tell us more about that.
Yeah, they've been to my home. They've been to West Mitchell's home, and they can come to your home or your business and outfit you with anything that you need from an audiovisual standpoint. All around the state, really, guys. Whether you need something as simple as mounting a new TV. Just yesterday, actually, wife and I were looking around the house, and I'm like, I've got at least 2 spots that I could get Integrated Media to mount a new TV. And in reality, I probably got even more. We were at Firehouse Subs the other day, and we're like, there's this awesome mural. Remember that?
Yep.
Like, they could turn this into a massive TV or even a TV wall. And if you want some inspiration for that man cave or just any audio-visual stuff around your house, if you like to geek out on that like me, Integrated Media Columbia on Instagram and Facebook is how you can find them. Give them a call, 803-948-8327 or integratedmediainc.com.
Lost in the shuffle of the baseball and the draft over the weekend, Lamont Paris continues to cook in the transfer portal. Got Jordan Butler out of Missouri a week ago, and Nick Pringle, somebody that was highly sought after when he entered the transfer portal, officially committed to the Gamecocks over the weekend. A couple of bigs coming in, already playing in the SEC, obviously, and should find good roles with this team coming up next season.
Yeah, guys, I would say this felt like South Carolina's top big target out of the portal in terms of just the guys that were realistic and also had some mutual interest. And so a big weekend for South Carolina. They would have loved to go 2 for 2 on transfer portal guys over the weekend. Of course, as people probably know by now, Jameer Brickus, the point guard, commits to Villanova. That was really a tight one that went back and forth from what we understand down the stretch over the weekend. But with Nick Pringle, this is someone who, like I said, big target for South Carolina. They essentially are replacing 3 starters from that team that went to the tournament last year. And I think Pringle is the guy who could come in, be an athletic defender at that 5 spot and allow CMB, who we've talked about maybe having a little more range than he was asked to show this past season, maybe being someone who could be a little bit more of a BJ Mack role like we saw this past year from BJ. This, I believe, kind of would open CMB up to that a little bit. And really, I think for the most part, you can see how this staff has sort of started to close out this recruiting class. And now the one big spot they're going to have to fill, they can put all their energy into going out, as we've seen that they're trying to do right now, add that big portal guard to kind of complete this cycle for them.
And it's another guy that, is from the state of South Carolina, obviously went to Alabama or started off at Wofford, then went to Alabama these past couple seasons. But it's another in-state guy that Lamont Paris is able to return home, in addition to getting the big talent out of the state. CMB a season ago, now Cam Scott after decommitting from Texas. Like, he is truly building a nice, fertile recruiting ground here in the state of South Carolina, where we know there is so much good at basketball talent, and hopefully that'll continue to translate with more success for this basketball program.
Yeah, it's, you look at it and you got to be excited about the offseason that they've had because, with Pringle, you get an athletic big who can defend and finish at the rim. And certainly, heck, just go online and look up some of the stuff he did against the SEC and against Clemson in the Elite Eight. Man, this guy can really help you. You think about him playing alongside CMB in year 2 for CMB. CMB maybe stepping out a little bit more. We know apparently he has the range. Him kind of not being BJ Mack, right? But like being able to step out a little bit more and take on a little bit more of that shooting you're going to be missing with the departure of Mack. Very exciting there. You think about adding Jordan Butler, who's a guy that probably has a little ways to go, but certainly has the upside. He has more size. The missing piece, as Wes just laid out, you got to go find a guard. Dakota LaFew going to Georgia. That was I think Wes nailed that one. That was the school that was kind of the one to watch, the threat. He's from Georgia. One of his teammates committed there. And you miss out on Jameer Brickus. So it's an important piece, but you look at some of the other, how resourceful they've been, the job they've done in the portal. If they can go out and find somebody there that fits what they want, this would be a really, really good off-season class.
Yeah, guys, I think they've got to find that sort of lead guard at this point. And I don't necessarily think he has to be some big name, highly recruited guy. I mean, Talon Cooper came in, and I think – no, I'll say this. I think we all looked at what Talon had done and sort of the number of assists and the floor general attributes. And I think it wasn't like everybody was saying, oh, who's this Talon Cooper guy? This is a terrible pickup. So I think to give it credit, like we looked at Talon and like, okay, I see what they're going for here. But I don't think necessarily that this has to be a big name player who can come in and score 20 points a game. I think at this point you're looking for somebody who can be that floor general. And I imagine there's already a list of a couple of guys that now become the priority at that spot. But certainly it did seem like they wanted Brickus, and guys, they were right there about to land him over the weekend, and Villanova sort of, I would say, kind of rolled in the back door at the final minute, it felt like.
Regardless, doing good on the transfer portal front for Lamont Paris and the basketball team. Speaking of transfer portal, coming up tomorrow, it's the end of the window to enter your name in the transfer portal for football. We'll dive into that and assess where South Carolina stands with all of that coming up tomorrow. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up next, it's Halftime Show with Terry Ford on your Monday here on The Game.